he's the one that somehow gets on somebody's contact and then gets sucked into this group.
This isn't the Matrix. Phone numbers don't just get sucked into other phones.
The guy's a total sleazebag. The Atlantic is a failed magazine.
Deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes.
We hold government officials accountable in the public eye, so the voters and citizens of the United States can see what their leaders are doing. That's what we do.
It's wonderful to be sitting here with that celebrated sleazebag, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Mike Waltz actually called me the bottom of the scum journalists, wow. Which is very low.
That's very low.
Extremely low.
That's
scum.
Deeply low scum.
The scummiest scum.
The scummiest of scums. But, you know, obviously, you've talked about this a lot, but I would still love to hear just from you now. Take us back to the moment when you're sitting in the Safeway's parking lot and you're pinged to be invited into a group chat with, you know, half the Trump cabinet, right?
Yeah. I'll admit it, I'm not in the United States now, outside of local law enforcement. I was driving and I looked at my phone.
Right. I love the Safeway.
No, because I had the signal ping, and the signal had gone quiet for 18 hours. And then this Pete Hegseth text comes along, you know, where bombers are launching in an hour sort of thing. And I was like, let me pull over into the... I had to do some shopping anyway. It was fine. I mean, I wasn't wasting my time in the Safeway parking lot. But I was watching it, and then actually, that's when, obviously, I thought to myself, well, in 2 hours, I'm either going to find out that this is an elaborate fake, and someone is trying to entrap me, which is what our operating assumption was the whole time, simply because this is too stupid to be believed, right? Like, this can't happen, so it has to be an elaborate deception operation. And so I was agitated in a way, because I do take this stuff seriously, and if this is coming over my phone, I don't want my phone in public. You know, seriously, I mean, it sounds weird, but I was like, I'm just gonna hang out right here and keep my phone in my hand. I don't want anybody to be near me when, you know, I'm seeing this. And then, you know, the attack starts in Yemen when the texts tell me it's going to start. And I called a colleague who covers intelligence full time. And I said, so the thing that we thought was fake is real. And then we were off to the races.
Right. Well, so, I mean, once you determined that it wasn't a hoax, then you actually chose to remove yourself voluntarily from the chat. I mean, I can think of a lot of journalists who might have hung around. I mean, actually.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much inner debate you had, actually, about...
Well, this outer debate, people always forget in this conversation the existence of this profession called lawyers.
Okay.
You know, and I wound up I have so many lawyers. It's unbelievable. And by that Sunday, I had, and our company had, national security lawyers, First Amendment lawyers, and criminal lawyers. And, you know, we were all having meetings. I don't want to go into it too deeply. I mean, we're still anything can happen with this administration, so I don't want to go down that road too much. But I think the ethical thing to do was to leave the chat and let them know as soon as possible that I was in it. I had seen the story arc, and I had proven beyond any doubt that this was real. But there was also exposures that we didn't want to necessarily play with. And I'll just leave it at that.
I understand.
I will just say that a lot of lawyers made a lot of money in those couple of weeks.
So after all the commotion, and I mean, it really went on. It was an extraordinary
They
explosion.
didn't have to. They could have just said, yeah, we made a mistake, moving on.
Well, I think they could have said, thank you, Jeffrey Goldberg, for treating this.
Yes, because that's their nature.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
I can imagine. And then
frequently, they'll call up the New York Times and say, hey, Maggie Haberman did a great story about us today. We really want to thank you for helping us be better.
But they didn't. But they didn't have to go on to this trash Jeffrey Goldberg jihad.
It's also silly. The silliest part of that to me was I didn't ask you to send me this. It's like this is not an Edward Snowden type of situation where I have a source who's leaking me information. Sure. I'm just sitting there. It's very kind of millennial investigative. I'm just going to wait until somebody sends me something. Like a lot of reporters in this audience, I've probably driven, 1,000 miles across a war zone to get a quote from somebody who wasn't there. You know what I mean? We do a lot of work often to get very little, and here I just
you got the whole thing.
Keep going, Pete.
Keep it going.
I don't know. They didn't have to go down that route, and I wouldn't have gone down the route I went if they hadn't gone down that route. But since they called into question our veracity and my character and saying that there's nothing here, I had to then, once we vetted it carefully, because I take this again very seriously, once we vetted the information again, I went out and we published it because they called us, forget the names that they called us. They said that we were lying about what was in the chat.
Right.
And so I had to put it out.
That was a serious charge. What did you learn at the end of that whole commotion? What did you take away from this?
So many lessons about the serious. There's some very specific things about the seriousness of this administration and the competence of this administration. There's something I learned also about, to go to the theme of this conference, the only way to operate in this environment is to refuse to be bullied and refuse to be scared. And when you push back and the truth is on your side, well, then fine. It's not, I think we live in an authoritarian or an incipient authoritarian kind of climate, but we still can publish what we want to publish. And, when I was invited to the White House, I didn't think I was going to end up in El Salvador. A lot of people did. Somehow there's a trap at the bottom of the Oval Office and the chute that goes right down.
That's the second, that a few weeks later, Trump stunned everybody by saying that, putting on Truth Social, that he was inviting you to the White House for an interview. I actually couldn't help but smile because he said in the Post, the Atlantic want to come and interview me. Yes, Jeffrey Goldberg. They're calling me the most consequential president.
Yeah. He doesn't know that consequential is a neutral word.
Exactly, I know. And I thought to myself, how many times have I used consequential when I want to try to...
One of the great cheat words of all. Yeah.
It's the cheat one.
Syphilis is the most consequential venereal disease.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right.
And I'm not equating... Please, I'm not equating anyone in the White House to any venereal disease whatsoever. That was very funny, but that was also predictable. It was also very predictable. And Trump in the truth. So they invite us. They specifically say, the president says, please bring Jeff Goldberg with you. This was for a related cover story on Trump's first 100 days. Two of my colleagues, Ashley Parker and Michael Shearer, were going to interview him. Please bring Jeff Goldberg. There was an initial assumption that he was going to ream me out. And I thought, no, he's not going to ream me out. This is a kind of acknowledgement that, I got him a little bit. And that he just needed to he is,
He had to reestablish a sort of a connection with you. But he also, look, in fairness to Trump, he does see a lot of journalists. Unlike presidents who hide.
He's much more accessible than Joe Biden ever was.
Right, exactly. And he did invite you back. And it was a charm offensive.
It was a total charm offensive, and he's very charming. And this is the thing that people don't understand. You could hold two thoughts in your mind about Donald Trump. He's very charming, very charismatic, also does things that I, obviously from a media perspective and every other perspective, I don't appreciate. The job of a journalist in that setting is to not to lose yourself, obviously, in that moment. But no, it was a funny day because we're supposed to go there to the White House at 3. At 11 o'clock in the morning, he posts on Truth Social this long sort of attack. Jeffrey Goldberg, the biggest hoaxer of them all, whatever. I'm doing this because why not? I won anyway, so who cares? I mean, it's like... And so I walk into the Oval Office, and he's like very friendly, very warm. And I say, thanks a lot for the Truth Social post. That was really helpful. And he says, and this goes to the core of what he is. He says, I was just trying to put a little more pressure on you. And then he said, anyway, you're going to sell 5 times the number of magazines now. And there's always a transaction, and he understands a transaction at a very basic level. And this goes again so I asked him about Signalgate, and I said, you wrote in this Truth Social post, he was somewhat more successful. He's been mad at me for years because of the Suckers and Losers reporting that I did about what he thinks about American soldiers, right? He's been upset for years. He said he denounced that, but he said he was somewhat more successful with Signalgate. So I said, what do you mean successful? As in, oh, thank you for helping us uncover a flaw in our national security communication system. And he said, no, you were very successful. You got a lot of attention.
Right.
It was attention.
So it was attention. He saw that as the ultimate win for you.
That's a win. Like I won that round because I got a lot of attention. And that's what he cares about.
Yeah, fascinating. How do you, having covered, Trump 1 and now you're covering Trump 2, we all know there's been a sizable difference in the sort of, in a sense, the unfettered nature, shall we say, of Trump 2, because he doesn't have those wise men, as it were, around him from the old guard who he had when he didn't know anyone.
Also to use the phrase, the velociraptors have learned how to turn the door handles now, so they know where the power...
Exactly, the velociraptors. Yeah. So, but how do you see the effect of power and this restoration on Trump's character and his, your reading of the man?
He's having a great time.
Right.
Generally, he wasn't having a great time in the first term. He has no one around him who gets in his way, which is very important for him. No Jim Mattis's, Rex Tillerson's, John Kelly, nobody like that. They vet primarily for loyalty, absolute loyalty. He understands. He's so there's a kind of genius to his understanding of human cognition. I mean, he wouldn't necessarily articulate it the way I'm articulating it, but he understands that you can overwhelm people with ideas and words and word clouds and executive orders. And every day is a kind of a Watergate at this point. But we just basically, his sons are in the Middle East right now, and there's been good reporting in the Times and the Post about his sons are in the Middle East, basically like doing hotel deals on behalf of the president with sheikhs who understand that this is the price of admission. It's every day is something extraordinary. I mean, he literally in the last 2 days, talked about going to war over Greenland. Greenland is a part of Denmark, which is an ally and a member of NATO. He keeps saying this, and the general rule in the White House among the staff is if he says something once, ignore it. If he says something twice, that means we have to do something about it. He's been talking about Greenland obsessively, and so we're just overwhelmed by the sheer number of norm-breaking ideas and executive orders and he's where he wants to be. He doesn't quite understand why the tariffs aren't selling the way he thinks they should be. And he blames staff for miscommunicating on that a little bit. But he's in the captain's seat.
Actually, I mean, this whole, tasering of journalists essentially and the public with these new things every day. I mean, that is the strategy too, isn't it? I mean, the Steve Bannon strategy when he said, flood the zone with shit, and that's what he does.
Flood the zone with shit.
And it totally, disrupts the ability to focus. And I guess my question to you is, how do you focus? I mean, you don't have 5,000 people in the newsroom able to chase down every lead. I mean, where do you go? Greenland? Do you go to deportation? It's so many and so much.
Yeah.
Where do you focus?
So you have to sort of differentiate between what's prestidigitation. Look at the shiny object over here while I'm doing this. But sometimes this becomes the thing. Like Greenland at the beginning was like, do we really have to talk about Greenland? We're not invading Greenland, but maybe we are invading Greenland. So you have to move it. I think, look, at The Atlantic, we have an advantage. A magazine is different than a paper of record, for instance. They have to cover everything. There's no expectation on the part of our readers when they come to us that we're going to have a compendium of news. We can pick the things that obsess us the most, and so we sit around all the time and talk about how do we focus on this, and how do we discern the themes, and how do we figure out what's truly important and what's truly constitutionally important. But it's always chasing the story, but choosing what not to do and what not to focus on and how to tell the story. That's the most important.
Well, given that it's in the NU who presses go, I mean, what are the sort of Jeffrey Goldberg, that one, we have to do that one.
Well, I mean, try to make a larger point out of that question, which is that we forget in our profession sometimes, and this is a critique of everyone, including me, we forget that the first thing you have to do is be interesting. It doesn't matter if you have the world's greatest investigation. If people can't get past the lead without falling asleep, it really doesn't matter that much. So I do think about what's interesting and how do we tell this story in a way that would be different from there has to be a value added to it. So we do think about what lane is fairly empty, what writer do I have who can actually talk about this in a more interesting way and build some kind of narrative propulsion into it. And then there's simply the stuff that that shocks the conscience. And we pretty good seismographs for things that are ordinarily outrageous and outrageously outrageous.
You're very good at that, I have to say, because you did obviously do that big story where you quoted Trump in the World War II graveyard saying that journalists, fallen heroes were suckers and losers. And of course that made enormous amount of press. But actually, then you did this other piece that I just thought truly shocked me, which was where you reported that Trump there had been this young private in the army. She was of Mexican heritage. She'd been murdered, and Trump has the parents to the White House, and he tells them that he's going to pay for her funeral, and he stiffs them, right? Which you reported, and he made this incredible comment about
in the Oval Office.
In the Oval Office, would you want to tell people what he said?
So the setup is correct, and he was told it was a very big funeral because it was a very big case. The mayor came and everything else like that. And he said, how much did it cost? I asked one of his aides, how much did it cost? And he was told $60,000. And Trump responded, and I have multiple sources on this. Trump responded, it doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a fucking Mexican.
Incredible. I actually thought that, I thought that was more shocking than suckers and losers.
That was one of the seismographic when I heard that story from a very senior person, I was like, and I think a lot of us become inured to the sort of that style of discourse, right? John McCain, it's been 10 years since he said, I like people who aren't captured, which was to me the most shocking thing at the time an American politician had ever said, right? In the modern era, at least. But this really, that one really took my breath away, because I was thinking to myself, how does the human brain go from there to it means that the fear of being ripped off is that's the rosebud of the man in a kind of way. This intense fear that somebody is taking advantage of him. Then it expresses itself in racist ways or misogynistic ways, or
in tariff ways, which is that this country is ripping us off.
Well, that's right. I don't think I'm happy to say this. I don't think he understands economics in a kind you give money to a country and they give you a thing that you want. There's no rip off there. It's just I got I got a sweater that was made in Vietnam. The Vietnamese have $17 from that sweater purchase, and I have a sweater. I'm not walking around saying, fucking Vietnamese. I'm looking at this, saying, it's a nice sweater or whatever, but he just doesn't, it's this ultimate fear that someone is taking advantage of him, and he projects out, now the United States is him, only I can solve the problem, sort of thing.
And the United States is an underdog, essentially.
And the United States
Which is hard to
is
tolerate.
an underdog.
So one of the great things, obviously, about The Atlantic and is that a year after you became editor, Laurene Powell Jobs, the widow of Steve Jobs, multi-billionaire, became the majority owner. And would you say that it was that her freedom from these business conflicts that has allowed you so much editorial freedom, or perhaps it's the fact that you're making money and also you're a profitable editor, which is a very unusual thing these days? Is that, what are the factors really of having an owner like Laurene Powell Jobs?
Look, the North Star is character. I'm not just saying that because I work for her. The reason that we don't succumb to pressure is she has good character. And she also understands the nature of what it means to be a publisher in the United States. And a lot, I will tell you something, I've said this to our staff, I will say this here. She said to me, as some of these eruptions are taking place at the Washington Post, and Los Angeles Times, ABC, CBS, she said, I've never gotten so much credit for simply standing still. But that's the thing, standing still in the storm is an action, and just saying, our values are our values. They don't change with the shifting winds, and I think people respect that, and certainly the readers respect that. Again, going back to the Marty Baron quote, we're not at war. We're not a member of the resistance. We're just trying to do our jobs. We do it imperfectly. We make mistakes, but she supports the goal of honest journalism and has never once tried to interfere in the way we cover anything, which is really all you can ask.
All you can ask. I have this great fantasy that she will buy the Washington Post and become the heir to Kay Graham, because she's at the moment sort of.
I think, and I started my career at the Washington Post as a junior, very intern, kind of junior reporter, and so I have a lot of affection and fondness for the Washington Post. I don't think that the current Washington Post embodies the values of what we think of as the Washington Post. Kay Graham, Don Graham, Ben Bradley, Marty Baron. I've been hiring a lot of people from the Washington Post.
He's stolen 12 refugees from the Washington Post in the last, 3 months?
2 months.
2 months.
Like that. Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible.
I'm not counting, but
so
yes.
Why do you
think it's 14. No. And by the way, it's stealing is like,
No, they walked. They all walked over to you. So, why do you think that Jeff Bezos, in the sort of, he was a pretty good owner during the Marty Baron era. He was really good. Why is he having such a tough time aside from the whole kind of slithery, amoeba-like behavior towards Trump? How is he, why is he having such a tough time finding an editor and figuring out what the new quote, the new Post should be?
Well, here's the thing. This is to me, just me, this is a very simple business. You just have to make great stories and convince the readers of those stories to pay you to read those stories. The market understands what a quality story is. Our readers understand. There's tens of millions of people in America and everywhere who understand what a quality story is. Just make the best possible journalism, the most honest, truthful, interesting, well-written, well-produced journalism, and everything works out. I really do still believe that. If I didn't believe that, I probably wouldn't be doing this anymore because I'd probably be bored. I'm not trying to sound like I've discovered a secret. It's just the hard part is actually doing it right, making the stories. But once you lose that, and once you let anything else come into the picture, you're lost. You're adrift. You're at sea. Which is why so many people at the Washington Post, they've gone to the Atlantic, gone to the New York Times, they've gone to a lot of other places that I think embody the values that the Graham family, Ben Bradley, Marty Baron. I think an institution doesn't have the values. It's the people who are in that institution, and right now they don't embody those values. Why he's doing that, I don't know. We all can speculate. The space business, the cloud computing business. being an owner is hard. You have a bunch of, people who investigate you and you're paying them, and it's sort of annoying. I can imagine that that's not the most fun. You have to be committed to the mission. It's not a business, it's a mission. Yeah. And if you don't have that sensibility, when things get tough, you're going to fall off the track and end up where they've ended up.
Absolutely, indeed. Well, we're on running out of time. We have 1 more minute. So one of the things that I think that you've once said is that, and it's what I relish actually about The Atlantic, is the element of surprise. I mean, you never quite know what the point of view is going to be, which I value very much. I mean, you've said everybody who comes to The Atlantic understands that they're going to disagree with much of what we publish. I disagree with much of what we publish. What have you disagreed with that you published recently to conclude this conversation?
Now she's going to get me in trouble. The last minute. I have very idiosyncratic political views, which I try to suppress as much as I humanly can. So I'm not going to name a particular piece, because then I have to call the writer right away and then explain why I just said that in public in London. But it's not relevant to me. The honest truth is, it's not a relevant category. Whenever I hire someone, I said, you're not going to like all the people you work with, and you're not going to like all the stories. I don't care. If that's not for you, there are many small magazines that are ideologically pure that you can go get lost in. Go enjoy yourself. It's whether they make the best possible argument for the argument they're making, right? And it's whether it's interesting. I always come back to this. Just write something interesting. Maybe it'll infuriate me. I don't care. If it can pass fact-checking, I would run, and I've said this, I will run pro-Trump pieces if they can get through fact-checking.
Right.
That's a problem. And I'm not saying that just as a laugh line. It's also a laugh line, but it's not just a laugh line. It is a serious problem, and I think other serious places find that. It's like, make the argument, but you have to use observable reality to make your argument with. But I'm fine with that. And if people are, if people are very snowflakey about it, they don't have to subscribe and they don't have to read it. But I think we just want to hold true to this idea that we can be a big tent and that let the best argument win.
And cut through.
And cut through the noise.
Cut through. Well, Jeffrey Goldberg, thank you for putting out a magazine that is always interesting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.